Chapter 1. The Prince in Chains. He was born not in fire, but in silence. A boy with black hair and amber eyes, born to the southern sun of Nilfgaard's golden halls, yet swaddled in shadows before he could speak his name. He was a prince, heir to the Black Sun, the only son of Emperor Fergus var Emreis. The Empire awaited his voice, but the voice was stolen before it ever formed. Nilfgaard was rotting, not from enemies beyond its borders, but from within. The nobility murmured of weakness, of softness in the hand that ruled them. Fergus, once hailed as a conqueror, had grown cautious, hesitant, and in that hesitation, power slipped away like blood between the fingers of the court. The boy was 10 when the usurper struck. They came in the night, the armored knives of ambition. Fergus was dragged from his throne, his name erased from coins and chronicles. His family, the empress, the advisors, the boy, were locked away or put to the sword. Yet the boy was spared. Not by mercy, never that. Some say the usurper believed in punishment worse than death. Others whisper he saw use in the child, a symbol, a pawn, a curse. The prince was sent beneath the palace, into the oubliettes, where the sun did not reach. There, chained and nameless, he learned what silence truly meant. No longer air, no longer anything, and yet he endured. Years passed in that blackness. Time was measured not by days, but by pain. Cold stone, scraps of food. The rats spoke more than the guards. But within the boy's heart, something remained unbroken. Not hope, not even hatred. Purpose. He would live, not because he believed in life, but because death would have satisfied them. He would not give them that. Then came the curse. Some said it had always lived in his blood, carried by his mother's mad whispers and the strange signs she drew into the air. Others believed it was born in the darkness, like mold blooming in wet stone. One night, under moonlight seeping through a grate in the ceiling, the boy changed. His skin twisted into bristle, his bones shifted. He became a creature out of nightmares, a hedgehog standing on two legs, a beast with human eyes. He escaped. There are no records of how, no songs, no witnesses, only stories. A ship heading north, a storm that broke chains, a drowned soldier who claimed the beast vanished beneath the waves. What is known is this: the next time the world saw him, he bore a new name, Duny. He arrived in Sintra, cloaked in mystery, a knight from the south whose face only appeared beneath moonlight. He saved the life of King Ragnar, and by ancient law claimed the law of surprise. Years later, he returned to claim what was owed. Her name was Pavetta, daughter of Queen Calanthe, a princess untouched by war or want. She looked upon the strange night and did not see a curse. She saw something else, perhaps kindness, perhaps fate. They fell in love. Queen Calanthe raged. She would not see her line bound to a monster, to a stranger. But destiny does not ask for permission. At the feast, the truth came to light. Duny's curse revealed itself, and the court turned to violence. Yet in the chaos, Pavetta's scream tore through the walls like a storm. Magic flared, people were thrown like leaves, and when it passed, Duny stood unmarked. The curse was gone. Love, it seemed, had broken what years of pain could not. Pavetta and Duny were wed. For a brief time there was peace. A child was born, a daughter. Cyrilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, white-haired, green-eyed, her blood ancient, her future unknown. But peace does not last, not in this world. A voyage was arranged, a journey by sea. Where they were bound, no one knows. A storm came, fierce and unnatural. The ship was torn in two. Pavetta died. The child survived, taken by the waves to shore into the arms of destiny. And Duny was lost, or so the world believed. But in truth, he lived, crawled from the wreckage, broken not in bone but in heart. The man who emerged was not the same as the one who had held Pavetta's hand under the Cintran moon. He shed the name Duny as one sheds a burial shroud. He was no longer a knight. He was fire. He was vengeance. He was Emhyr var Emreis, the white flame, dancing on the Barrows of His Enemies. A name not meant to be spoken in joy, but in dread. He wandered for years, south through deserts in memory, hiding behind masks and silence. But always he watched Nilfgaard. The usurper's empire grew old and slow. The boy in chains had become a man with patience, and patience in war is sharper than any sword. Emhyr returned not with armies, but with silence, with secrets, with allies whose names were written only in blood. And when the time came, the usurper fell, just as Fergus had. No mercy, no song. Emhyr took the throne, not as a prince, not as a savior, as an emperor. A shadow returned in fire. And in the cold, golden halls of Nilfgaard, the world learned to speak his name again, this time in fear. But even as he raised banners and commanded legions, one thought remained. The girl, his daughter, the blood of destiny. And somewhere, behind the steel of his eyes, behind the flames he lit across the north, something colder burned. Not vengeance, not power, but purpose. The empire would be his. The world would bend. But she would be found, no matter the cost. Chapter 2. From Ashes, Fire. Years passed like ghosts in fog. Emhyr var Emreis wandered through forgotten lands, the world still believing him dead. He did not rush toward vengeance. Revenge was not a flame. It was a stone, slow-heated, heavy, and certain. The boy once chained beneath the usurper's palace now moved like a shadow across the continent, unseen but watching. He changed faces as others changed cloaks. Mercenary, traitor, advisor to broken lords and forgotten queens. In each role he played, he listened, he studied, he waited. The world thought him a drifter. In truth, he was drawing a map, not of roads, but of weakness. The empire he had once called home had grown fat on stolen victories. The usurper, once decisive and cunning, now sat bloated upon a throne he did not deserve. His court, made of lapdogs and sycophants, whispered of rebellion, but only behind closed doors. The fire had dimmed in Nilfgaard, yet its borders bled. The provinces stirred with unrest. The people still remembered the old line, the true blood. And so Emhyr returned. Not with trumpets, not with banners, but with silence. He came in through the back halls of politics, a ghost cloaked in foreign gold. His face was still unknown, his name still buried in the sea, but in the taverns and palaces, in mercenary camps and noble feasts, he sowed doubt. he stoked coals. A prince lost to time, now whispered to walk again. Some said it was myth, others feared it was prophecy. He gathered allies in secret, some for gold, some for revenge, some for the promise of a future where Nilfgaard ruled not by compromise, but by strength. They did not know his full name, not yet, but they knew the idea he carried. A restored empire, an unbroken crown. When the moment came, it was not war that fell upon the usurper's court. It was a knife. Several, in fact. The emperor was found poisoned, stabbed, drowned, and strangled, depending on which spy you believed. There was no body laid in state, only blood upon marble and a sudden, shuddering silence. Into that silence stepped Emhyr. He did not declare himself at once. He let the nobles stew in fear, let them wonder which of them was next. And when the whispers had ripened, when the people cried out for order, for a banner to follow, then he emerged, cloaked in black, crownless, but with the eyes of a man who had already conquered the world in his mind. "I am Emhyr var Emreis," he said, "and I am what you feared, and what you need." Some bowed in fear, most bowed in relief. The empire welcomed its new master not with celebration, but with trembling gratitude. From the start, Emhyr ruled differently. Where the usurper had used gold and appeasement, Emhyr used steel and silence. He purged the court of those loyal to the past. Ministers vanished overnight. Generals who questioned orders were found dead in their own armor. Even the nobility learned to whisper only when the wind did not carry. But it was not cruelty for its own sake. Emhyr had vision. He saw Nilfgaard not as it was, but as it could be. A black sun rising over a continent ruled not by petty kings and treaties, but by order, by a single will. His will. He reformed the legions, standardized armor, introduced new tactics. He poured coin into roads, into infrastructure. Farmers who once rebelled were now fed. Merchants who feared taxes now prospered under imperial protection. And yet, all knew one truth. Prosperity was allowed only so long as obedience was absolute. The old noble houses were broken. New blood, loyal to Emhyr alone, filled the vacuum. Bureaucracy flourished, sharp, cold, and efficient. The empire became a machine, and Emhyr sat at its center, watching. Always watching. But even as his power grew, one thread remained tangled. Her, Cirilla. He never spoke her name in court, never allowed her portrait to hang in the halls. But in the deepest chambers of the palace, maps were drawn, spies sent north, gold passed hands, sorcerers questioned, oracles bribed, monsters hunted, not for coin, but for whispers. He did not know if she lived, did not know if the child born in Sintra still walked the world. But he would find her, because she was not just his daughter, she was prophecy, the elder blood, the child of two worlds, the key to a future shaped not by steel, but by time itself. Emhyr did not believe in destiny. He believed in claiming it. And if the stars had marked Cirilla for something great, he would see it done, not for her sake, but for the empire. Nilfgaard had conquered land. He would conquer fate. Chapter 3. The Emperor Reborn. The black sun rose slowly, not in the sky, but in the minds of men. There were no celestial signs, no omens in the stars, no storms thick with prophecy. Only the quiet, relentless spread of a name, Emhyr var Emreis, spoken first with hesitation, then with awe, then with fear. The white flame dancing on the Barrows of His Enemies. No title had ever suited a man more, not because it inspired devotion, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. He had walked through chains, through exile, through blood and fire, and emerged on the other side, not broken, but sharpened. He did not rule as Fergus had ruled. Fergus had worn the crown like a father holds a child, tenderly, carefully, as though it might slip away. Emhyr wore it like a blade, cold, precise, willing to cut. The empire changed. In the past, Nilfgaard had lurched forward like a drunken beast, sometimes winning, sometimes collapsing under its own weight. Now, it moved with purpose. A machine of war and will. Borders were redrawn not with ink, but with blood. Emhyr did not make speeches from balconies. He did not parade through the streets in gold and silk. He ruled from behind closed doors, behind endless corridors of polished obsidian and white marble. His presence was a shadow cast across the entire continent. He listened. He remembered. He decided. And when his voice finally came, low, calm, final, it carried the weight of armies. Under his gaze, the provinces that had once whispered rebellion fell silent. He did not waste time with executions. Instead, he altered their bones, gave them new purpose. A former rebel became a tax collector. A smuggler became a supply quartermaster. A corrupt governor vanished one day, and his son inherited the position, after swearing eternal loyalty to the throne. Nilfgaard's heart beat stronger than ever, and so it looked north. It began with border skirmishes, small conflicts in places most maps forgot, villages razed by bandits that turned out to be soldiers, missing caravans, hunting accidents, the kind of events that could be ignored until they couldn't. The First Northern War was not declared, it unfolded. Cintra fell first. Some called it revenge, others saw it as closure. For Emhyr, it was necessity. The land that had once taken his wife, that had raised his daughter, that had nearly destroyed him, he returned to it not as Duny, but as emperor. He did not gloat, did not weep. The city burned, and he watched in silence. Queen Calanthe, the lioness of Cintra, threw herself from the tower rather than face his armies. Her death was not mourned in Nilfgaard, but in Emhyr's eyes, there was no triumph, only inevitability. The northern kingdoms rallied, too late. Temeria, Redania, Caedwin, Aedern. They had spent years squabbling like crows over carcasses, and now a wolf had entered the field. They did not understand what they faced. To them, war was a matter of banners, of honor, of charge and retreat. To Emhyr, war was math, steel and fire, maps and messages. He used spies the way others used swords. He struck at supply lines, not battlefields. He conquered mines before he conquered cities. Nilfgaard took ground. And with each province, Emhyr demanded not worship, but compliance. He cared not for loyalty, only for order. The white flame burned through resistance, but did not linger in celebration. Villages were rebuilt, roads paved, grain distributed, priests replaced, laws restructured. To the conquered, Emhyr offered this choice: obey or be forgotten. some did, some vanished. In taverns across the north, his name became a curse. In battlefields, it became a prayer, both to bless and to damn. Mothers told children not to speak it after nightfall. Generals refused to utter it aloud, calling him only the South. But always he came, with armies of perfect discipline, with war machines powered by oil and fear, with commanders who feared him more than death. He came, and as the north bled, Emhyr sat on his throne of black stone and read every report, not as a king, as an architect. The northern kingdoms were not merely rivals, they were clay, a continent not yet sculpted, and Nilfgaard, his Nilfgaard, would be the hand that shaped it. Behind closed doors, his generals debated. Some urged him to slow, others to strike harder. One, a nobleman from Vicovaro, dared suggest diplomacy. He was never seen again. Emhyr did not suffer hesitation, but he was not reckless. He knew war could not last forever. That fire, once spent, leaves only ash. His vision was not conquest, it was permanence, an empire that would last 1,000 years. He issued new coinage bearing no face, only the sun. The message was clear. The emperor was not a man, he was a force, eternal. And yet, for all the steel and stone, one thought continued to echo behind the walls of his mind. Cirilla. As the north fell, spies returned with whispers. She had survived the fall of Sintra. She had traveled with a witcher. She had vanished into war, into shadow, into legend. Some said she had powers beyond reckoning, that the elder blood had awakened. Others said she was dead. Emhyr believed neither. She was alive, and she would be his. Not for love, not for kinship, not for redemption, for purpose. Because she, like Nilfgaard, was a tool, a key, a path to something greater than empire, greater than thrones. She was destiny. And Emhyr var Emreis did not wait for destiny to knock. He hunted it. Chapter 4. War and Order. The First Northern War did not end. It receded, like a wave drawn back into the sea, waiting for the moment to rise again, higher, stronger, final. Nilfgaard's legions did not lose. They were not broken. They returned home as architects return from a half-finished cathedral. The foundation had been laid, the measurements taken. All that remained was the final carving, the hammer and the flame. Emhyr var Emreis sat in his throne room in the imperial palace of Lokgrim, surrounded by silence. It was a place unlike any other in the world. Black stone polished to mirror sheen. No torches, only oil lamps behind lattices of gold. Windows narrowed to slits, not for defense, but to keep the sun at bay, so that only the light Emhyr allowed would touch the room. The throne itself had no back. He did not lean. He did not rest. Emhyr was not built to pause, not after all he had lost. He rose before the sun, read every dispatch, marked every movement across the north. He memorized the names of soldiers who fell in his service, not out of compassion, but as a ledger, as proof of what order demanded. He rarely slept. When he did, the dreams came, not of war, of a child, white hair, green eyes, a scream that cracked the sky, a voice he had never heard, calling him by a name he no longer bore. He would wake in silence, soaked in sweat, and return to his work. Cirilla had become more than a daughter to him, more than a symbol. She was the missing piece, the conclusion to a great equation, the final note in a song written across generations. Sorcerers whispered of prophecy. Elves spoke of bloodlines and gateways, of time itself bowing to her steps. He did not know what was myth and what was truth. He did not care. She must be found. The First War had served its purpose. Cintra was ash, the northern kingdoms shaken. Intelligence had been gathered, resistance measured, and Cirilla, like a ghost, had moved through it all. Sometimes behind Geralt of Rivia, sometimes ahead of him, sometimes lost in the mist. She had not come to Nilfgaard as he had hoped. She had not accepted her fate. She would learn. The Second Northern War began as the First had ended, without warning. Nilfgaard struck Temeria first, the heart of the North, where kings believed themselves untouchable, where rivers marked borders, not just of nations, but of pride. Fortresses fell in hours, villages surrendered without a fight. Where resistance flared, it was crushed beneath boots and fire. Emhyr did not lead from the front. He did not need to. His will flowed through his generals like blood through arteries. He had trained them himself, not with weapons, but with thought, strategy, cold vision. He forbade looting, forbade unnecessary slaughter. Nilfgaard would not be seen as a horde, but as a verdict. When his troops marched into a city, they brought order, grain, clean water, and silence. Always silence. He appointed governors in conquered cities, men and women loyal not by oath, but by construction. Their rise had come only through his design. If they failed, they would vanish. If they succeeded, they would be rewarded. All feared him, all owed him. Still, the North did not fall easily. Aedern fought like a beast cornered. Cedwen used sorcery, and winter itself, to slow the march. Redania schemed, weaving alliances as spiders weave webs, carefully with venom. But Emhyr did not blink. He allowed them to struggle, allowed their kings to make speeches, to call councils, to rally bannermen. He let them believe they had time. And then he took Sodden. The field was black when it ended, bodies charred, soil poisoned. The sky, even weeks later, refused to brighten. A victory, yes, but at a cost even Emhyr did not expect. 13 mages had stood on the hill that day, holding the line with fire, steel, and something older. They died one by one, but not before turning thousands of his soldiers to ash. The lesson was clear. Mages were not to be underestimated, and so Emhyr turned his eye from kings to those who stood behind the throne, the Lodge of Sorceresses. It did not yet exist as such, not in name, but he could feel the threads being pulled. Philippa Eilhart in Redania, Francesca Findabair among the elves, Margarita Lo Antil in Aretuza, Yennefer of Vengerberg, always beyond reach. They were gathering, and Cirilla was somewhere among them. It infuriated him. The thought of others shaping her mind, teaching her to resist, to choose, as if destiny were a matter of opinion. He summoned Vilgefortz, a sorcerer, powerful, ambitious, dangerous. Too dangerous, perhaps, but Emhyr needed a key, and Vilgefortz claimed he could find her, could bring her back. They met in chambers lit only by the green glow of enchanted crystal. No guards, no scribes, just two men who saw the world as a shape to be carved. Their agreement was simple: find her, deliver her, and live. Vilgefortz bowed and vanished into the storm of war. Emhyr returned to his throne, hands clasped before him, mind burning not with conquest, but with anticipation. He imagined her walking through the gates, pale hair flowing behind her, a crown not on her head but in her blood. She would not call him father. He did not want that. He wanted her obedience, her power, her future. He would give her a throne unlike any other, would raise her beside him not as an heir, but as a weapon. Together they would remake the world. But in the darkness behind his eyes, in the memories he refused to name, a voice still whispered, Pavetta. She would not have wanted this. And for the briefest moment, Emhyr's hands trembled, then stilled. Pavetta was gone. The past was a tomb. Only the future lived, and Emhyr var Emreis would shape it with fire. Chapter 5. Daughter of Destiny. Her name was never spoken in the throne room, not aloud. Not in reports, not in proclamations. No courtiers dared say it, not because it was forbidden, but because it was sacred. The name carried weight. Not the ceremonial weight of lineage or titles, but something older, heavier, the weight of prophecy, of power. Cirilla, Fiona, Ellen, Rhiannon. She haunted Emhyr var Emreis more completely than any enemy ever could, not in anger, not in guilt, in certainty. She existed, and she mattered. The fires of the Second Northern War still raged. Cities fell, borders blurred, maps were rewritten every fortnight. Yet Emhyr's mind drifted, again and again, toward a girl he hadn't seen since she was an infant. A child whose face he barely remembered, whose voice he had never heard, but who now ruled his every decision. He did not believe in love, not anymore. Pavetta had been the last, and her death had burned clean any ember that might have survived in his heart. What Emhyr felt for Cirilla was not paternal, it was not even personal. It was fate, or something close enough to fate that it could be used. The White Flame had always believed in structure, in order, in the hand that arranges pieces on the board. Chaos was weakness. Choice was illusion. The strong shaped the path, the weak walked it. Cirilla was a path, or a gate. The elder blood that flowed in her veins, ancient, volatile, unknowable, was more than magic. It was potential. The elves spoke of her with reverence and fear. She was to them the one who might restore what they had lost. The humans called her a weapon. The sorceresses saw in her the promise of transformation or destruction. To Emhyr, she was the hinge on which history would turn, but she would not come willingly. Vilgefortz had failed. At first, his reports were promising. He had located the girl, had spoken with her, had even won a shred of her trust. But then she slipped through his fingers, again and again. As if she were not bound by the same gravity as other mortals, she vanished into the chaos of war, then reappeared in rumors, riding with a band of rebels, disguised as a boy in the back alleys of Oxenfurt, spotted among dryads, trained by a witcher, hidden by a sorceress. Each story painted a different girl, a wild one, a warrior, a queen, a ghost. And Emhyr hated them all, not because they made her more dangerous, but because they made her more real. He wanted her to be clean, blank, unmarked by the world, a vessel. But Cirilla had lived, had suffered, had fought. She was not a page waiting to be written. She was ink and blade. The White Flame did not show rage, not in public. But behind locked doors, dispatches were torn, maps shredded, voices silenced. Vilgefortz was recalled. He came bearing excuses, injuries, half-truths. Emhyr offered him one more chance, and no more words. He ordered every available resource directed to a single task: find Cirilla. Not kill, not capture. Deliver. Alive. Unharmed. Untouched. The court, in its wisdom, did not ask why. They had seen what happened to those who questioned Emhyr's interest in the girl. But in the quiet corners of Loch Grim, they speculated. Was she a lost heir? A symbol to unite the North? A relic of love? Or merely the Emperor's madness given shape? The truth was more complex and more dangerous. In his private chambers, beyond layers of locked doors and spell-woven protections, Emhyr studied her. Not in the flesh, but in paper. Drawings, descriptions, sorceress sketches, genealogies traced back to Lara Doran, dreams recorded by half-mad prophets. Every line of her life, as far as could be gathered, he consumed. He read of her fall into another world, of unicorns and stars, of realms that bent to her presence. He read of her time with Geralt, of how she called him father, that word, the word Emhyr had long since cast aside, dug into him like a thorn, not from jealousy, from recognition. He had tried to rule fate. Geralt had simply cared. One day, an agent returned with word. Not confirmation, not proof, a whisper. She had entered Nilfgaard, of her own will, disguised, hidden, but near, so close. And Emhyr felt something in his chest that he could not name. Not hope, not fear, an ache. He prepared a wing of the palace, quiet, isolated. Gardens she would remember, even if she did not remember why. Clothing not royal, but plain. Books in elder speech. Maps of stars. No guards, no gold. Only the possibility of peace, for her and for him. He did not plan what he would say. He had never been good with words. But in some dim corner of his mind, he thought, perhaps she would understand. Perhaps she would stay. For once, not because she had to, not because she was bound, but because she chose. And then the girl arrived. But it was not her. Not truly. A decoy. A girl named Cirilla, yes, but not his daughter. The lie shattered something inside him that had long been cracking. He dismissed the girl, quietly, kindly. He sent her north to begin again, far from thrones and lies. Then he stood alone in the gardens he had prepared, and knew, without doubt, that the real Cirilla would never come. Not to him, not to Nilfgaard, not willingly. And that if he wanted her, he would have to become, once again, the man who took. Chapter 6: The Emperor and the Ghost. The war quieted, not because peace had been found, but because both sides had bled themselves dry. The northern kings clung to fragile alliances like drowning men to driftwood. Nilfgaard paused, not in defeat, but in assessment. The maps were smudged with ash. The names of towns no longer mattered. Only silence remained between the lines. And in that silence, Emhyr var Emreis sat alone. He had built an empire from smoke and steel, had broken kings and bent nations. The white flame that once danced high above the Barrows of His Enemies now burned low, no less fierce, but steadier, colder. It flickered behind his eyes, not on the battlefield. He had become what he was always meant to be. And yet, she was still not his. Cirilla, Not the decoy, not the legend. The real girl, the one who ran faster than prophecy, who defied destiny not with rebellion, but with innocence. The girl who slipped from every net, who left behind myths like footprints in snow. He knew now what she had become. No longer a child, no longer a pawn. She was power walking on two legs, a force shaped not by blood alone, but by choice. And she had chosen not to return to him, not to embrace her birthright, not to wield her inheritance as a dagger in his hand. She had chosen to disappear. He hated her for it, and admired her more than he would admit. News reached him from spies, intercepted dreams, whispers passed between sorceresses. She had crossed plains, worlds, fought monsters in lands without names. And in the end, she had returned not to a throne, but to the man who had once raised her from ruin. Geralt of Rivia, the Witcher. He had haunted Emhyr's periphery for years, a phantom figure in wolf's leather, sword across his back, silence in his step, a relic of an age that refused to die. The Butcher of Blaviken, the White Wolf, father to his daughter in all but blood. When Emhyr spoke the name Geralt, it was not with disdain. It was with something colder, recognition. They had never truly met, not in peace, not in war, but their paths crossed like shadows at twilight, neither touching, neither yielding. And yet, both men knew the others clearly as if they had stared for hours across a battlefield. Geralt represented what Emhyr could not control. Not the North, not magic, not prophecy, but choice. Where Emhyr built legions, Geralt built moments. Where Emhyr ruled with fear, Geralt ruled with presence. And Cirilla had chosen him. That burned worse than any loss. In the throne room of Loch Grim, Emhyr ordered all searches for the girl to cease, officially. He told his court that the matter was closed, that the false Cirilla had fulfilled her symbolic role, that the people had their empress in word, if not in flesh. Behind closed doors, the hunt continued, quieter, sharper, no longer with armies or sorcerers, but with whispers, with shadows. If Cirilla would not come willingly, then she would come through inevitability. He would engineer a world where she had no choice but to return. And yet, in the moments between dispatches, between campaigns, between the quiet clink of goblets in empty halls, Emhyr wondered, what would he say? If she stood before him now, real, whole, grown, what would he offer? A throne? He would not take it. Power? She had more than he ever would. Family? He had destroyed that long ago. He imagined the confrontation often. She enters the garden, older now, her eyes his but deeper, a blade at her hip, her voice steady. She asks him why he hunted her, why he used her, why he let Pavetta die. He has no answer that would satisfy. He tells her the world must be shaped. She says it already was. He says destiny is a chain. She says she cut it. In the imagining, she always turns and walks away. And he, Emperor of the South, Lord of Legions, son of a forgotten throne, cannot follow, because he would rather die a ruler than kneel as a father. The thought gnawed at him. He took no new wife, named no heir. The court speculated, as it always did, but Emhyr heard none of it. He sat in council with generals whose faces changed yearly, met with ambassadors whose tongues twisted like ivy, approved plans for cities he would never walk through. And all the while, the memory of her lingered. not a memory. A ghost. One night, in the deepest chamber of the palace, Emhyr ordered the guards dismissed. He walked alone. Through corridors of marble, past frescoes of conquest, past banners that bore his son. He opened a door, sealed for 17 years. Inside, a cradle sat untouched. Dust covered the mobile above it, small wooden stars carved in silence. A faded shawl lay draped over the edge. Pale green, Pavetta's favorite color. He stood there, unmoving, for hours. No one saw him leave. The next morning he signed the decree. Nilfgaard would withdraw its legions from Lyria and Aedirn. No reason given, just silence. The court panicked. The north rejoiced. The spies scrambled. But Emhyr said nothing, because in that moment, for the first time in his reign, he no longer knew what he wanted. The throne was his, the continent bowed, but the ghost remained. She would never be his, not truly, not in the way he once believed. And so the emperor did what emperors must. He ruled, but with every edict, every strategy, every motion of the quill, he remembered the girl with green eyes, and the man in wolf's leather who held her heart. Chapter 7. Beneath the Flame. There comes a time in every reign when silence speaks louder than banners, than horns, than victories. Not the silence of defeat, the silence that comes after everything has been said, after every battle has been fought, after every enemy has knelt, bled, or vanished into history. Emhyr var Emreis sat alone on the black marble throne. It no longer felt like a seat. It was a weight. Across the empire, cities flourished. Roads shone with merchant trains. Governors recited decrees like scripture. Soldiers trained in formation, their armor gleaming in the gold-washed southern sun. On maps, Nilfgaard sprawled like a god's shadow, touching oceans, crawling over mountains, licking at the edges of the Yaruga and beyond. But none of that lived in Emhyr's eyes anymore. He had built an empire, yes, but it did not belong to him. It belonged to the idea of him. The white flame, a force, a name, a title wrapped in awe and fear. Something to which people bowed without knowing why. He could feel it now more than ever, that separation. That dissonance between the man and the myth. The myth burned bright. The man burned out. He had no heir, no child to mold, to curse, to sacrifice for the sake of vision. Cirilla was gone. Again, beyond his reach, not in body, but in truth. She had made her choice. She had survived everything he could throw at her and still refused his will. There was no replacement for her. No second daughter, no worthy son. Just paper names from distant cousins, whispered by noble houses with hungry eyes. Let them whisper. He was tired of listening. In his private library, there were scrolls older than Nilfgaard, texts that spoke of the conjunction, of the first rifts, of the time before time. He had read them all. Not for conquest, not for strategy, but for understanding. To know if all this, power, blood, legacy, meant anything at all. One scroll spoke of a king who ruled the stars and died nameless, forgotten in the dust between dimensions. Another told of an elven priestess who birthed a god, only to be devoured by it centuries later. In these stories, Emhyr saw echoes of himself, a man carving meaning from chaos, only to be swallowed by the very order he forged. What would remain? A statue? A dynasty of names that did not matter? A sun etched into coins no one would care to spend? He wondered what the world would remember. Would it remember the victories? Sintra, Sodden, the burning of Bruges? Would it remember the reforms, the roads, the markets, the law that made all languages equal beneath the crown. Would it remember the cost, the spies, the betrayals, the sorcerers buried beneath his wrath, the girl he tried to bend and lost? And would it remember him? Not the title, the man. Would any song sing of the boy in chains, of Duny, of Pavetta? Would anyone whisper his name without flinching? He doubted it. He no longer believed in legacy. Legacy was a story the living told themselves to survive, and he was tired of stories. The court still functioned, the empire still moved, orders were still issued in his name. But Emhyr no longer needed to speak. His machine ran on its own. He spent hours staring out at the gardens Pavetta had once walked, the same gardens he had once prepared for Cirilla, the same place he now wandered in silence, hands behind his back, footsteps the only sound. The trees bloomed as if unaware of war. The birds sang the same songs they had always sung, indifferent, pure. He envied them. One day a messenger came bearing news from the north. A king had died, another risen. Redania and Temeria had formed a new alliance. There were rumors of rebellion, whispers of a northern counteroffensive. Emhyr waved it away. Let the north burn again. He would not move, not for them, not for anything. That night, he stood in his chamber before the great obsidian mirror. He looked at himself, not as an emperor, but as a man. His beard had gone gray. Lines creased his brow like scars on stone. His eyes were still sharp, but behind them, something flickered, a hollowness. He whispered her name. Not as a command, not as a threat, just once. Cirilla. The mirror did not answer. No face appeared behind him. No ghost, no prophecy. Only him and the empire that waited, eternally hungry outside the door. He turned from the glass, extinguished the flame, and vanished into the dark.